Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here to give you round two, a look at the Canon EOS R, and also the reasons why, after some continued updating to the system, I've finally decided to add one to my own kit. Now, if you missed my first review of the Canon EOS R, you're welcome to take a look at that, and so I'm going to highlight, this is not going to be as thorough a review today, more just an update on what's changed with the system and why it might be a more compelling option for you in the end of 2019 as it was towards the end of 2018. And so we're going to jump in and take a look at a few aspects of that here today. So one of the main areas in which things have improved, and that Canon has addressed some of my my kind of chief criticisms, not all of them, but not all of them are addressable via firmware, but certainly one of the big ones was when it came to Canon's IAF. Now, of course, this has been one of Sony's chief advantages in the mirrorless space, and still today, I would say that Sony is the best when it comes to real-time face tracking, IAF tracking. But Canon has done a lot to close the gap. Originally, the EOS R allowed you to have IAF, but only in a single shot without any kind of continuous tracking, which kind of really defeats the purpose since eyes are constantly moving. Fortunately, through firmware updates, and I do want to commend Canon for continuing to commit to this platform and to improve the camera via firmware updates, but along the way, we're now at firmware revision 1.6 as of just a few days ago. And while 1.6 was a more minor firmware update, along the way, Canon has added some really improved features. Amongst those was improved IAF that now works much more similarly to what Sony's does. And the IAF is really solid now, as you can see by looking at this video tracking.
Okay, let's take a look here as I move from side to side, how the eye tracking is working here under video functionality. Quick move forward, backwards, forwards. So once again, we'll see how we're doing with the Canon 50mm f1.2 when it comes to tracking my eye.
I would say at this point they lag only behind Sony amongst all the other platforms when it comes to IAF, and really that's not by a large margin anymore. It's fairly close. The great news is it allows you to use lenses like some of their great very wide aperture primes. I've got the 50mm f1.2 L RF lens on here, so it allows you to use that and basically just not even worry about where in the frame your subject is when it comes to tracking. And that's a huge asset when it comes to using wide aperture glass. Gone are the days where you had to worry, like with the DSLR, about focus and recompose, or making sure that you're in the more sensitive AF points, or all of those various things. And so if you oftentimes past, if you wanted to compose kind of in the classic rule of thirds, it was either focus and recompose, or wondering that with a wide aperture lens, maybe it's going to be properly focused, maybe it's not. And now you have just incredible accuracy with these wide aperture lenses, and not just the RF mount ones, but really I've had great success with adapting any of my EF mount lenses as well via the control ring adapter, which is my adapter of choice. We'll come back to that in just a moment. They've also improved other things, like improving the latency between the autofocus and the display, making for a more connected experience, a more kind of reactive experience. And one of the other complaints that I had is that, particularly since it had been built into not only the 5D Mark IV, but a number of other cameras, is that there was no intervalometer that allowed you to do time lapses in camera. They've addressed that, and even one better than what it does with Sony, you can create those 4K time lapses right in camera, and so it saves you some extra steps afterward, and so that's an asset there. Now, let's talk about a few of the pros that now exist on the EOS R that I think are real strengths. One of those is that there's no question that EF mount lenses adapt better on the EOS R than what they do on the Sony bodies. At this point, I've used basically all of the competitive Sony bodies. I own the A9 and the R3, and I've spent a lot of time with the A7 III and the A7 R4. And so I can say this, and that is that, for example, I recently reviewed the Sigma 40mm f1.4 Art. And even using the dedicated Sigma adapter for Sony, the MC11, I still had smoother results, particularly when it came to video performance with the on the Canon EOS R. And so you can see just in the difference between these two clips how much less noise there is in the autofocus process during video. I suspect that this is an end result that comes to perhaps needing less adapting from the EF-based focus system to the EOS R's focus system, and so certainly that is an asset there. Another one of the criticisms that was there initially of the EOS R system was the fact that, of course, lens selection for a brand new system was limited. And it's like, Canon was anticipating that the EF mount lenses, EFS lenses, would help to fill in the gap, which is certainly true. They do adapt enormously well. So there were 4 lenses at launch, but since that point, that lens selection has grown out to 10 native Canon RF mount lenses. And really, it's not just that the lens selection has grown, but I believe that a lot of Canon's best development is going into the RF platform. And there are a lot of really fantastic and unique lenses. It's like Canon has, with this new mount and greater electronic communication with additional pins, that it's opened up some additional design elements to them that weren't there previously with the EF mount. And we've really seen that with unique, particularly wide aperture zooms. We've seen inclusion of IS in more lenses. For example, the new 15 to 35 millimeter f2.8 RF lens coming with IS. That's the first time that we've seen a wide angle zoom like that from Canon coming with image stabilization. And beyond that, they managed to pull it off better than what Tamron did, in that they also, you can use traditional filters on there. And so it's that lens has really been popular. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I'm hearing a lot of glowing feedback about that. And then, of course, some really just incredible wide aperture prime lenses like the 50mm f1.2, the 85mm f1.2. These are lenses that certainly give Canon an advantage, and I think that is one of the main areas where maybe some serious portrait photographers are starting to sit up and take notice of the EOS R system, because those lenses are system sellers, if you've got deep pockets, that is. At the same time, I think what may be helping some to expand the lens platform is, as it starts to build out there, we are finally starting to see at least some third-party support. And so at the moment, I'm working on reviews for the Samyang AF 14mm f2.8 and a native RF mount, and I'll be bringing you a review of that. I've also got on the manual focus front, I've got the Yasuhara Anthe 35mm f1.8 manual focus lens that I'm working on right now, and so it's a compact, wide angle ish, wide aperture-ish manual focus prime, and so that's at a moderate price. And so I certainly, to start to get third-party support is really going to help this system to go a little bit more mainstream. One thing that has continued to be a great strength for Canon is that Canon's colors really are special. And I say that without a lot of bias. I actually primarily shoot Sony at this point, but I'm willing to quickly acknowledge that I still think that Canon's colors are among the best. Beyond that, the grip here, this camera feels better in hand than any other mirrorless body that I've used. It has a great grip. It also has a great viewfinder, and I find that the viewfinder is just a little bit more vivid and lifelike, even than the higher resolution viewfinder that's available on the A7R Mark IV. In some ways, the EOS R's viewfinder still has a little bit more of a lifelike, vivid feel to it that I certainly like. And so there are a number of strengths that are here at this point. Some serious weaknesses still remain, however, and they are worth mentioning. One of those is that while you really have incredible focus now, with the addition of IAF and real tracking, it's great for a lot of usage. It's very good in low light. Some of the very best performance we've ever seen in low light comes with the EOS R. But if you're in competitively tracking type situations, The EOS R just, it is not competitive at this point. You know, it has 8 frames per second burst speed, but that's without it real-time tracking. And so if you drop to actual tracking, then your burst rate drops to kind of mediocre levels that really are not much beyond what we saw with, say, the 5D Mark II a long time ago. And so it certainly is not competitive with some of the bodies, like, you know, basically all the bodies from Sony, for example. And so that's kind of a missing area still for Canon, and probably, obviously, it's not going to be addressed in the EOS R. It probably will be addressed, hopefully, in a future body. I have a Ford car with an EcoBoost motor, and one of the things that I've noticed, along with others, is that, you know, EcoBoost, which is a turbocharging system, you either get eco or economy if you drive it easy, or you get the boost, the power, if you drive it hard, but you don't get both at the same time. That felt like a good analogy for what's going on with the EOS R. Some great power when it comes to the focus system, but if you need to boost it, that power becomes somewhat useless because you can't track fast action all that well due to a limited burst rate. There obviously are still some limitations when it comes to the video, and you know, unfortunately, we're still stuck at this point with that 1.7 times crop factor, you know, and that is a mitigating factor. Yes, you can use lenses to offset that, including crop sensor lenses to offset that, but if you're out, as I often am, with one lens and you want to both get some stills and then maybe get some video footage at the same time, well, you're stuck with that 1.7 times crop factor. So, you know, I was out yesterday with this 50mm f1.2L, and, you know, all of a sudden that 50mm lens starts to behave, you know, not just like an 85mm lens, but more like a 90mm lens, which gets really tight in certain kinds of situations. And so obviously that is a limiting factor. And of course, after having spent years now with Sony bodies with in-body image stabilization, I certainly miss IBIS in this body. And the reality is that a lot of the lenses that Canon has released don't include in-body image stabilization. And that's true also of a lot of EF mount lenses that I'm adapting. And I've gotten spoiled by having, you know, in-body image stabilization available for all the lenses that I mount on Sony cameras. And so that's certainly a factor that I miss. One other thing that I think it was something that I raised in my initial review, and it's still true at this point, even though there are a lot more lenses, 10 native mounted lenses that are either released by Canon or just about to be released. Out of those, only 2 of them have an MSRP of under $1,000, and one of those is at $899, and so it's not all that much below that MSRP point of $1,000, and many of those lenses are over $2,000 in price. So, I mean, the bottom line is that this is still a system that, while the camera body is relatively affordable, and of course, if you're looking at the RP, even more affordable still, but the amount of lenses that are natively available at, you know, consumer prices is very limited. Now, of course, there's hopes that maybe, you know, third parties will help out with there, but that's certainly a missing link in terms of Canon's own lineup, that there really aren't a lot of options available that are affordable options, and only one that's available that's under $500. And so that's certainly an area where Canon needs to focus some effort. So as I draw towards a conclusion, let me just mention a couple of the things that I'm really enjoying in terms of accessories for the system. I love the control ring adapter, and I found that when I used the standard adapter and I didn't have that control ring, I was missing what I considered a vital link for adding physical controls to the camera. So right now I have this set up for exposure compensation, and to be able to do that with all the lenses I have attached is really useful, to be able to just quickly turn that dial and have exposure compensation. Now, of course, you can add any number of other things to that, or set it up to run any number of other things. But for me right now, that's what I'm enjoying. Another thing, and I'll have a review for you at the end of December, hopefully for this, but I also have some drop-in filters to go into that adapter from Aurora Aperture. And so much like the review I brought to you of the MC11 filters, they actually sit into the adapter and so give you a rear filtering option. And so, and obviously these rear filters, they'll work for, you know, you don't have to worry about the front dimensions of a lens or filter thread. And so they kind of work universally as long as you're adapting a lens. And so they're very useful. And as you can see from some of these shots, it opens up creative possibilities to get some really beautiful end results from that. So in my final analysis, I'm finding it hard to recommend DSLRs to people these days. Obviously, I have a lot of people that ask me gear questions, gear recommendations, and I'm finding it really hard to recommend a 5D Mark IV or a 6D Mark II over the EOS R and the EOS RP. There are a lot of camera for the money really at this point, and I personally, I'm not missing doing lens calibrations to try to get proper focus. I'm not missing having to worry about where I'm composing, and so, you know, the AF points might not be as sensitive. The improved autofocus at this point and the flexibility that comes with mirrorless is really, to me, a really attractive thing. And so at the point right now, you know, sales are on, and so you can get an EOS R for around $1,800 US, and that's a lot of camera for that money. And so I would say, as long as you don't need a specialist tool for either action photography or a specialist tool for video, I think that the EOS R is a fairly easy camera to recommend. At the same time, I will acknowledge that Canon is playing catch up. And there's still some areas where they're behind. I think that they're kind of have been married to some older chipsets that they've really got to upgrade those processes to be truly competitive with Sony in particular. And so I think that we may see that in this year with the new EOS R bodies coming. But at the same time, it seems like they are focusing the greatest measure of their creativity in this space right now. And obviously they have still the largest camera company in the world. They have a lot of resources to bring to bear, but they better do it soon, because Sony, report after report shows Sony really kind of mopping up the market share. And that's particularly true when it comes to full frame mirrorless space. And so Canon has definitely got some catch up to do there. And I think to help to achieve that, they've got to expand the lineup to have some more affordable lens options there. So 2020 will almost certainly bring enhanced EOS R bodies, something in the R series. You know, there's talk about higher resolution or maybe a more pro-oriented body. But of course, it's going to come at a price. And so if you don't need a specialized camera with capabilities beyond the EOS R, I think it's well worth a look at this point. They've improved it enough via firmware and expanding the lens options that it really is, it's a great camera to use. It's a lot of fun to use. It produces beautiful results. And so at this point, I have added one because I want to continue to do reviews of the RF mount lenses that are coming out. And I know I have had a lot of requests from many of you to do that. And I was reluctant for a long time. Throughout all this time, I didn't buy an EOS R body. But as I've seen what Canon has done in terms of improving the EOS R and continuing to roll out more lenses, I decided that it was worth doing at this point. And so that's why at the end of 2019, I bought an EOS R. If you'll take a look in the description down below, you can find linkage to the image gallery with more of these photos. You know, I've shown you some here. There's lots more to look at and to check out there. There's also buying links if you'd like to purchase one for yourself or purchase the RF control adapter, which I highly recommend. Take a look at that. There's also linkage to follow me on social media, to become a patron or sign up for my newsletter. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and stay warm.